Oh my God. I am so sorry.
Security, please step back.
Richard, I am so sorry.
You're a Miller? Which Miller? The senator's daughter?
Yes.
The glass left her hand before she even realized she had thrown it. Red wine flew through the ballroom lights and splashed across the tuxedo of the most powerful man in the room. 300 guests went silent. The string quartet stopped in the middle of the song. For one frozen second, nobody moved. Then someone gasped. Someone else whispered, "Oh my God!" And near the center of the ballroom stood Richard Hayes, billionaire businessman, real estate empire owner, and the man nobody in the city dared embarrass. Except tonight, a 29-year-old catering server had just covered his $15,000 tuxedo in red wine. Security rushed toward her. Elena Ramirez didn't run. She stood perfectly still, her hands trembling at her sides. The event coordinator stared at her in disbelief. "Elena, what did you just do?" Elena swallowed. She looked at Richard. "I mean to." One of the guards grabbed her arm. "She's coming with us." Richard raised one hand. "Stop." The guard immediately released her. The entire ballroom watched him. Richard slowly looked down at the wine dripping from his jacket. Then he looked at Elena's name tag. Elena Ramirez. His expression changed. Not anger. Recognition. He looked back at her and asked the one question that would change her life forever. "What's your father's name?" Elena froze. "My father?" Richard didn't blink. "His name? Miguel." A strange silence filled the room. Richard quietly repeated it. "Miguel Ramirez." Elena's heart began pounding. "How do you know my father?" Richard looked at her for several seconds. Then he said, "Because I owe him something." And he walked away. Elena had spent the last 9 years trying not to think about her father's diner. It had once stood on the corner of 5th and Crane, a small neighborhood restaurant with 12 tables, cracked red booze, and the best coffee in the city. Her father, Miguel, had owned it for 23 years. He knew every customer's name. He remembered everyone's favorite breakfast. And every Sunday morning, Elena would sit behind the counter doing her homework while her father cooked eggs and pancakes. It wasn't a fancy life, but it was theirs, until everything disappeared. When Elena was 20, the diner closed. Her father lost a building. The bank took it, and within months, Miguel was no longer the loud, smiling man Elena remembered. He became quiet. He stopped talking about the diner. He stopped going downtown. And whenever Elena asked what happened, he always gave her the same answer. Sometimes good people lose things they don't deserve to lose. He died 2 years later. And Elena never got the full story. She had always blamed the bank. But deep down, she'd also blamed one man, Richard Hayes, because his company had eventually purchased the property. At least, that's what she'd been told. 2 days after the ballroom incident, Elena expected to be fired. Instead, she received a phone call. "Ms. Ramirez?" "Yes." "Mr. Hayes would like to see you." Elena almost laughed. "Why?" "I wasn't told." An hour later, a black car stopped outside her apartment. A driver stepped out. "Mr. Hayes is waiting." Elena stared at the car. "I don't think I should go anywhere with strangers." The driver smiled politely. "He expected you to say that." He handed her an envelope. Inside was an address, 5th and Crane. Elena's stomach dropped. She knew that address. She hadn't been there in 9 years. The old diner was barely recognizable. The sign was gone. The windows were boarded up. Scaffolding covered the brick walls. Inside, the restaurant had been stripped down to the wooden floors. Elena stood in the doorway, staring at the place where she'd spent her childhood. Then she heard a voice. "Your father hated this floor." She turned. Richard Hayes stood several feet away. No tuxedo. No security guards. No crowd. Just a dark shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Elena stared at him. "You bought this building." Richard nodded. "My company did." "You destroyed my father's business." Richard's expression tightened. "No. You bought the property." "Yes." "You knew what it meant to my family." "I did." "Then why?" Richard looked toward the old counter. Because I wasn't a man who took it from your father. Elena frowned. What does that mean? Richard walked toward a wooden table covered with documents. Your father didn't lose his building because I wanted it. He placed a folder in front of her. He lost it because the bank wanted it. Elena opened the folder. Inside were old financial records, foreclosure notices, bank letters, and one document she'd never seen before, a mortgage transfer. Richard pointed to the date. I was 26 when I found out what the bank planned to do. Elena looked at him. What did you do? I bought the loan. She stared at him. You bought my father's loan? Yes. Why? Richard took a breath. Because the bank was going to foreclose immediately. He paused. I couldn't afford to buy the building outright, but I could buy the mortgage. Elena looked through the papers. So you stopped the foreclosure? For 18 months. Her eyes widened. Why did my father know? Richard looked away. Because he thought I was trying to take his business. Elena's voice became quieter. Were you? No. Richard shook his head. I was trying to give him time. Time for what? To recover. Elena laughed bitterly. He never recovered. I know. You don't get to say that. Richard didn't argue. Instead, he opened another folder. Inside was an old photograph. Elena immediately recognized it. Her father stood behind the diner counter. Young, smiling, alive. But Elena noticed something written on the back. A sentence in her father's handwriting. She turned the photograph over. Her eyes filled with tears. I don't want charity. I just want one more chance. Elena whispered, He wrote this? Richard nodded. He wrote it to me? She looked up. You knew my father? I met him 3 times. Only 3? Richard smiled sadly. Your father didn't trust me. Elena almost smiled. That sounds like him. Richard nodded. He told me something the first time we met. What? He said, a man isn't measured by how much he owns. He's measured by what he refuses to take from someone weaker. Richard looked around the empty diner. I never forgot that. Elena sat down. For 9 years, she'd imagined Richard Hayes as a heartless billionaire who had watched her father lose everything. But the truth was different, and somehow that hurt more. Then what happened? She asked. Richard sat across from her. I gave your father 18 months. And he couldn't save the business. Why? Richard hesitated. Because the diner wasn't his only problem. Elena looked at him. What do you mean? Richard pushed another document toward her. A list of debts, supplier payments, medical bills, business expenses. Elena slowly realized something. Her father's debt wasn't only from the diner. He was sick, she whispered. Richard nodded. He didn't tell you. Elena's eyes filled with tears. He told me he was fine. He wanted you to finish college. Elena covered her mouth. Suddenly, memories came rushing back. Her father working late, his shaking hands. The days he'd said he wasn't hungry. The mornings he'd insisted Elena go to class instead of helping at the diner. She had thought he was simply stressed. He had been hiding everything. Richard continued, Your father refused every offer I made. Why? Pride. Elena smiled through tears. That definitely sounded like him. Richard reached into the folder one last time. Then he placed a set of keys on the table. Elena stared at them. What are those? Richard looked at her. The building. She didn't understand. What about it? It's yours. Elena stopped breathing. No. Yes. I can't take this. You can. This is worth millions. I know. I don't want charity. Richard smiled. Neither did your father. He pushed the deed toward her. That's why this isn't charity. Elena looked down. Her name was printed on the document. Elena Maria Ramirez. Owner. She couldn't speak. Richard stood. Your father spent the last years of his life believing he'd failed you. Elena looked up. He didn't. No. Richard shook his head. He didn't fail you. He pointed toward the old diner. He left you something. Elena whispered. What? A place to come home to. 3 weeks later, the scaffolding came down. The windows were replaced. The red booths were restored. The old counter was polished. And above the entrance, a new sign appeared. Not Elena's name. Not Richard's. It said, Miguel's Diner. Underneath, it was a smaller line. EST 1987. The lettering came from an old photograph Elena had kept in a drawer for 9 years. Her father's handwriting. On opening morning, Elena stood outside holding the keys. She looked at the building. For the first time in years, she didn't see what she'd lost. She saw what remained. A little girl sitting at the counter doing homework. A father laughing behind the grill. Coffee cups. Sunday mornings. A life that hadn't disappeared completely. Her first customer walked through the door. Then another. Then another. By noon, every table was full. But there was one empty chair near the window. Elena had kept it there for her father, just in case. That evening, she looked across the street. Richard Hayes was standing on the sidewalk. He hadn't entered. He simply nodded toward her. Elena walked outside. You could come in. Richard smiled. I think this place belongs to your family. It belongs to me now. Yes. She looked at him. Why did you really give it back? Richard thought for a moment. Because your father once gave me something. What? A chance to become a better man than the one I was becoming. Elena smiled. And the wine. Richard laughed for the first time. That was probably the most honest thank you I've ever received. Elena laughed too. Then she looked back at the diner. Her father's name glowed above the door. She finally understood something. Some people spend their entire lives chasing money because they think money can repair everything. It can't. Money can buy buildings. It can buy companies. It can buy time. But it can't buy back a father. It can't erase regret. And it can't change the past. Sometimes, all you can do is tell the truth. Return what was taken. And give someone a chance to finish the story their loved one never got to finish. Richard walked away without entering the diner. Elena watched him disappear down the street. Then she turned around. She unlocked the door and stepped back inside. Because her father hadn't really left her an empty building. He had left her a place where his story could continue. And sometimes, the greatest inheritance isn't money. It's the truth.
If you love mind-bending mysteries, shocking plot twists, hidden secrets, and unforgettable stories, hit that subscribe button and join Kahani World. A new mystery is waiting for you in every video, if you're brave enough to watch.